What is going on, everyone? It's your boy ACK here. We are here with another Spotlight interview series. And today we got a big artist here. He auditioned for American Idol. I've been a fan of him ever since then. And he is a talented songwriter too. I can't say enough about this guy. Is Ryan Harmon. Ryan, what's going on, man? How are you?
AC, my friend, thanks for having me on. And I think we ought to just cut it right there, man. That's better. That's better than anything I can say about myself. I like that. You're the marketing team now. You're hired.
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take that any day of the week. Um, I mean, I know who you are. Like I said, you auditioned for American Idol. You were on there and stuff like that. And that's kind of how I really started following your story and stuff like that. But for people that don't know who you are, just kind of before we get into the whole interview process, is just let people kind of know who you are as a person and a little bit about who you are as an artist.
Well, I'm a country singer, songwriter, and performer from Lamar, by golly, Arkansas. As anybody who watched the American Idol audition probably remembers, which, by the way, I didn't know that. I was actually just had a reflex about to say Lamar, by God, Arkansas, and then I just right there I edited myself on the spot and went, I don't know if by God it's going to go over so well on a show that airs on a Sunday. That's how that happened. That combined with the shoe we made for an interesting T-shirt. But yeah, I've been playing music for this. This makes year number 12 now that I've been playing music, performing shows, and writing songs. I always joke that it's 12 years of playing music and about 3 months of trying to get good at it. But I'm blessed after years, as we'll probably get into during the interview, after years of kind of doing it more as a hobby and something that I wanted to turn into a living. I finally made that leap last year of going ahead and being full time as a musician. So I'm proud to say that I do what I love for a living. It's definitely not the best paying job I've ever had. It's not going to make me a rich man by any means, but man, I couldn't be happier. I love it.
No, and hey, listen, I respect that. I mean, it's just at the end of the day for me, it's not about the money, it's not about the fame right now for me. It's just a passion that I have and it's what I love doing. And I mean, we'll definitely connect through the interview because obviously you're a country guy, I'm a country guy. Everyone knows I got that soft spot for country music, especially that 90s, early 2000s country too. That's where a lot of my stuff comes from and just where I reminisce a lot of the times.
And that's what I was born and raised on, man. I was born in '95, so the
Yeah,
first
I'm
true
yeah, and
country
I
artist
was
I
in
can ever
90s.
remember hearing.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I
there
was
you go.
in 97 too. So I mean, we're right about that same time frame, right? Just about there.
And the
Um,
first new country artist I could remember hearing, well, I mean, relatively new at the time, I guess he'd only been around a few years, but Clint Black was the first
yeah,
that I could remember hearing of, like his songs were still he was still a modern artist, which is
exactly,
crazy to think about now because you look back and like, well, they've always played this classic country music. Well, it wasn't always classic, it was new at that
exactly,
point. And we were hearing that's when those golden days where Tim McGraw and Faith Hill and Shania Twain and Garth Brooks were still kind of at the peak of their careers and still churning out great music all the time. Stuff that, like I said, now it's classic. But we were
exactly,
lucky to be in that. I'm gonna say it. What might have been the last period of that really magical. And I hope there's another period.
yeah,
And who knows? It may be that I'm just so biased towards that in 10, 20 years we'll look back at some of the other stuff that I maybe didn't pay as much attention to, and it'll be looked at in the same way. And like always, there are good songs and bad songs. In any
mhm,
area you look at in country music, that's always an argument about what's real country and what's not real country. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you a lot of the stuff we loved in the '90s wasn't necessarily real country, but they
exactly,
didn't claim it was either. Uh,
exactly.
you had Travis Tritt and Garth Brooks who were telling you straight up. Garth said some of my biggest influences are Bob Seger, Kiss, Queen, James Taylor, Kansas.
Yeah,
He told you up front. Travis Tritt said my biggest influences were Hank Williams Jr., which that should have been all the information you needed because Hank didn't care what it was. He cared that it was a good song. Waylon, Johnny Cash, but also Allman Brothers Band, ZZ Top, B.B.
hmm,
King, Stevie Ray Vaughan. So it was a different time.
exactly. No, and I mean that's just like I said, like I always just reminisce on that old country music. I mean, like I'm not like obviously I always talk about it a lot. Is just because the way country is now, like it's kind of not in that phase anymore. And I always reminisce with that storytelling. Like that's what I always love from especially that 90s 2000 is just from that storytelling, like all the words and stuff behind it, not even just the song in general, just the story they were trying to tell back in the day.
And that's
um
what jumped out at me more than anything. And that's why I think I decided to become a song. Well, I don't know that I made the decision. I think it just kind of chose me, not to be corny, but I remember when I was in first grade, I got in trouble on the playground one day because I had a notebook out there, spiral notebook,
yep.
and I was on the playground sitting on the swing set just writing these lyrics.
Yeah.
And no idea what I was doing. It's just I loved music so much, and I knew, and it was, again, this is going to sound, half of it's going to sound like I made it up, half of it's going to sound corny, but there's got to be somebody else who has had this happen. But even at that young age, I hadn't lived anything. I was 6 years old. I
Yeah.
didn't know anything. I hadn't lived at all. There wasn't any life experiences I could share. But the one thing I knew is that every song that I loved was about something.
Mhm.
And no matter what it was about, it went into it in a deeper way, and it was okay. To some people, this is just this thing, but to me, it means a lot more than that. There's stories in this. So I was just writing these lyrics about these random things throughout the house that somehow I had kind of this emotional cling to for some reason. I just write these lyrics that were terrible, but somehow I knew that that's what you did. If you wanted to be a country singer, somebody had to write those songs. And it somehow
Exactly.
just clicked with me of, okay, well, I want to be, and as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be a country singer.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. From the time that I was 3, 4 years old, the time that I could remember anything, I knew just from growing up. Well, I'm about to just completely, I'm about to read an autobiography. I tell everybody this: feel free to say the word "shut up," Ryan. Sometimes you need to. But
Hey, there is no
anyway, I'll shut up for the time being.
no, there is no worries. No worries at all. Like I always tell people, this is just a chill, laid back interview. We're just having fun. And you kind of touched up on like the first question a little bit already, is just kind of like how you got into music, which was obviously you really like got into that storytelling and just stuff like that. And you clearly were writing from an early age. Um, but like what
I
really
probably
like
blew through all the questions. Just
no,
I was about
exactly.
to just go through the whole thing. I'm like, hey, can you tell that I interviewed Jim Dandy when I was in high school?
No, it's just
Oh
crazy.
man,
But yeah, no, I mean, because like I didn't start at an early age. Like I only started a few years ago with my songwriting and stuff like that. And I mean, I've always had a passion for music and stuff like that, but it's just I never really I just kind of put it to the side and didn't really do anything until like the last few years of my life. And now I'm just kind of really, now I'm already over 25 episodes on the Spotlight series. And now I have you on here, which is crazy because I've been a fan of yours for a while.
well, thank
Um,
you, man. I really appreciate that. That
no,
truly does mean a lot to me. Truly,
no, of course. Of course. So obviously you were writing at a young age. And obviously music was just there for you at like a young age and stuff like that. And then you really probably started pursuing it as you got older. And then you probably grabbed the guitar, I'm assuming, started playing the strings, and then the vocals started coming. But like, did you like who were some of your inspirations that like really inspired you to get into music, and like family wise too? Did like anyone really like push you when they first started hearing you sing and stuff like that?
no, nobody did, man, and that's probably part of why I got into this because I was really lucky. I didn't have family that tried to push you in a certain direction.
Mhm.
There's a lot of that around here, just living, and I'm sure there's stuff like that. You said you're in Boston, right?
Yeah, up in Boston.
And I'm sure there's similar stuff there too. But down here, it's football time, and
Exactly.
that's what it is. It's sport. Everybody pushes their kids to do sports, and
Mhm.
I've got some new music I'm working on that I've got a song I wrote that kind of talks about that early time in school whenever I was about the only long-haired weirdo musician that was thinking I could make something out of myself with this,
Mhm.
getting laughed at by all the sports folks. Well, you can't really start your own team all the time, but you can play music independently. I'm about to step on all kinds of toes. But yeah, it was really more than anything. It was the fact that it was in my family. more than being pushed in a certain direction by family.
Mhm.
Uh, Everybody loved music and sang or listened to it and was infatuated with it, I guess you'd say. Don't ask me to spell it. We'll get to that later, I guess.
No, absolutely. But like,
My grandfather. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no. But yeah, no, like, cause like, I mean, who were some like more like your big inspirations? Just cause like I know like 90s, early 2000s, that's definitely like where we both come from. And like I was big Travis Tritt, Garth Brooks, George Strait, George Jones. Like, hey, I could keep naming them, and I bet you could probably name them all too. But like, who were some of like the really like big guys that like really inspired you, or even women as well?
Well, and I'm not just saying this. You named them all. The ones that seriously,
Yeah.
those were the ones.
Yeah.
Those were the ones that made me take notice of this stuff. And
Mm.
George Jones was the first,
Yeah.
just because that's what even outside of radio, and they were still playing them on mainstream country radio at the time. You would still hear "Who's Gonna Fill Their Shoes? They Stop Loving Her Today," Tennessee Whiskey. Yes, friends and neighbors, Tennessee Whiskey existed before 4 years. it's, it it was written in like 1979, somewhere in
Yep.
there. It was a song before that. And a lot of people don't realize that David Allan Coe and
Exactly.
George Jones recorded that years and years ago, and it's a great song. Of course, even Dean Dillon, one of the guys who wrote it,
Yep.
even he plays the Chris Stapleton version now. He knows where the checks are coming from, and I love Dean. Of course, Dean wrote 60% easily of George Strait's catalog. Uh,
Yep.
so that's the songwriting part started to seep in after I started to buy the records and read the liner notes. But yeah, George Jones was the first because my grandpa worshipped Jones,
Yeah.
and it was what we'd listen to all the time. I talk about the song of mine called Country Fried, which is really
Mhm.
about growing up around my grandparents' farm. It's just outside Bluffton, Arkansas. If you've seen the movie True Grit, I don't
Yes.
want to say I don't want to say the real one, but the one that I grew up with, John Wayne, Glenn Campbell, Kim Darby.
Hmm.
It's Bluffton is near Dardanelle and Yell County, literally. So that's that part of the country. Um, they did make it seem like a much bigger area than it ever has been. I'm kind of amused by that because it's there's still parts of it where if you want to get anything done, you got to go to Fort Smith. So that's still a thing in some parts there, but that's what's so beautiful about it. You're in an area like that where it's nothing but God's country and country, and that's really what I grew up on, listening to those tapes in my grandpa's truck. We
Mm.
could get a couple of radio stations out there, but like
Yeah.
they still don't even have cell phone towers out there. So
Right.
there's about a 30-mile radius where you don't have cell phone reception.
Mhm.
And to my knowledge, they're not really planning on changing that. I don't know why, but there's a beauty to that. So when you're out there in the fields with grandpa riding around in the truck and
Mhm.
driving cattle and riding on the tractor and hauling hay, you're listening to cassette tapes. He'd have
Exactly.
his little, they had their bigger cassette tape carriers, but they have the little ones in the truck, the
Yeah.
little plastic shell
Yep.
cassette trays, and that's where he'd have two or three George Jones cassettes. You'd
Mhm.
have Merle Haggard, you'd have Mel Street, all of this stuff that I just hadn't heard anywhere else,
Exactly.
outside of a song or two on the radio. But that was really George Jones was the first one.
Yeah.
Because also my mom had the George Jones super hits set that we'd listen to as well. So coming home from grandma and grandpa's house on the way back, we still listened to George Jones. And
Mm.
the first song on that cassette was White Light.
Yep.
And that just immediately the White Light. That you play that for a 5-year-old kid, he's gonna lose his mind. I don't care who it is. They love that every time. But that was really it. Was just being exposed to all that classic country, and then like I said, the '90s country,
Yeah.
and it was Clint Black, Travis Tritt. Here in about the last 10, 15 years, I've really gone back to and realized that there's a lot of his stuff that I missed at the
Mhm.
time for whatever reason. Of course, now being such he's my number one, and now just being such a huge fan of his, I know that a lot of that is because he got some pushback at that
Right.
time where some of his stuff was looked at as, whoa, that's a little too rock, that's a little too this, you're outlaw and all of that. But it was at the time for sure the ones that really struck that chord with me was George Jones,
Yeah.
George Strait,
Hmm.
Garth Brooks, Clint Black. I even had the first guitar that I ever had. I got it when I was 4 years old under the Christmas tree. Didn't know how to play it. I thought the reason it had six strings on it was so if you broke one, you had five left. I really thought that's how it worked. I thought, once you're out of those, then somehow, I didn't know if you just got another guitar and you threw that away. I had no idea how that worked. But for some reason, I thought there's an entire industry based on this now. But I thought, man, I'd really love to have this guitar autographed by Garth Brooks. Well, I
Hmm.
can just write it on there myself. How I arrived at that, I don't know. Of course, like I said, there's an entire industry that does that now. But there's this photo of me standing out the back, just kind of beyond the back 40, so to speak. And I'm wearing this camouflage coverall suit because it was the closest thing I could find that looked like those weird Garth Brooks '90s outfits that he'd wear.
Yeah.
Black cowboy hat. I'm standing there with that guitar and it says Garth Brooks on it, which is just written very crudely in Sharpie because my handwriting's never been good. And that's what I had on the guitar, and it's that photo. I wish I had somewhere, man. I'd show it to you. I'm still kind of that's one of the moments where I for sure knew that this is something I wanted to pursue for a living.
Right.
Yeah, that was in the double live thing. My brother doesn't hold this against me, but he should. He got the double live set. Christmas. Well, me being a dumb kid, I went, "Oh, there's two tapes in that. Of course, there's two copies. I get one, you get one, right?" No, that's not how it worked. I didn't know the double album at the time, so I didn't know that they had two different sets of music on it. So I
Yeah.
ended up taking one, he had the other, and eventually, once we kind of realized, hey, you've got songs that I don't have, and vice versa. But man, listening to that was a big deal too, because I'd never been to a concert. I didn't know what that was, didn't know anything about it. But
Right.
yeah, that time in the '90s, I think there was a probably 5 or 6 year span that really just put me over the edge of knowing that I wanted to do something.
Yeah. No, and that's just awesome because like kind of like the same thing, like kind of how you said is like in my house, like you like when my mom was cleaning and stuff like that, or just when we're having family parties and stuff, like they used to collect a lot of CDs. And I used to just listen to all of them. Like I just like pop them in there and like so they would be like Garth Brooks, like you said, Travis Tritt, George Strait, George Jones, just all of them. Like I just plug them in there and start just listening. And that's really what got me into especially country music. And I mean, like I love all genres, but like country music is just the biggest one for me, and that's just how I got into all of that. And like we've kind of said too, is just the storytelling behind lyrics and stuff like that is just what we connect with a lot and stuff too. And all the songs that you have out are just amazing. Like I'm a big fan of a lot of the songs that you write. And kind of getting into the third
I
question.
appreciate that.
No, of course. And kind of getting into the third question is like, what is your creative process? Like when it comes to writing a song, like how do you write a song? Like I knew this would happen. Like that was like, I love that song. Like the minute you played that on American Idol and stuff like that, just like, how do you write? Like, what is your process?
Well, it's one of those things. If I knew what it was, I'd bottle it up and sell it. The old phrase. I wish that I knew how that happened.
Mhm.
Uh, a pun. I don't know how this happened. But it's one of those things where, like I said, being on the playground in first grade and writing these songs and just knowing that somebody had to write them and knowing that it takes digging into something a little more than you normally would or most people would. I think it's really my process really is just when I get any kind of idea and if it's something that I feel like I can go ahead and just sit down and there it is,
Mhm.
I can write that song. But sometimes it's just words that come to me. Sometimes it's words and music together. That happens more often than not because I just kind of, and I don't know why this is, but I'm just kind of wired to where I'll put a melody and a beat to words. I don't know why, and I don't really know how to explain that, but
Yeah.
I think a lot of other writers probably do that too.
Mhm.
But it's really my process is just taking that idea and trying to expand on it the way I want to and look at it beyond a song at first. So probably the way that I've always done it that has consistently worked for me is unless it's one of those things where it just how it is in my head right now, it just pops out right on paper and there it is. That's the song. Which that happens. Honestly, I knew this would happen. That was one of those songs,
Yeah.
and I knew it was gonna be something. I could never imagine it was gonna do what it did. But I knew when I wrote that song, there's something here. And if nothing else, I enjoy playing it. It was way different from a lot of stuff I'd written up to that point, but I knew there was something there.
Yeah.
But especially for songs where I may be trying to, it's not that I want to force anything,
Mhm.
but I always try to think about, okay, what do I want to say in this song, and line by line, if I'm telling a story or if I'm trying to get any kind of point across, well, what is it exactly that I want to say? Not thinking about it from a rhyming standpoint, but just what exactly word for word do I want to get at?
Exactly.
And I'll kind of I'll either write that out or think about it, and then at that point, I'll sit down and go, okay, now how do I make this rhyme? How do I tie this up?
Hmm.
And how does this follow a rhythm?
Yeah.
And a big thing for me too is figuring out, okay, as much as I would love having this be, that this idea be a song title or a chorus, is that where it belongs?
Mhm.
Everything can't be a song title and everything can't be a chorus. You got to have verses.
Exactly.
So also being able to decipher what needs to be a chorus and what needs to be a verse.
Mhm.
And I think that you can get a strong song that way if you're trying to make everything a highlight, but you have to at some point go, okay, this everything can't jump out as the hook. It doesn't work
Exactly. No,
that
and
way.
I
I
mean,
used to just write from inspiration or wait for inspiration, as they say, and that doesn't work too well because you end up not getting a lot of songs done that maybe you should.
no,
And you can
right.
miss the boat a lot of times because there's times where regardless of if you're doing it as a hobby or trying to do it professionally, there's a time each song has its time that
Ex-
that it really could strike a chord with people. And if you just wait around for inspiration and you've got that song sitting over there, this could be the time for it. And if you don't have it done, then by the time you finally do get around to it, it may not strike that chord anymore. So I
Exactly.
really probably in the last 5, 6 years especially have really made a habit of just sitting down and just writing something.
Mhm.
Whether it's finished or not, whether it's going to be the final version or not, that'll be what it is, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But that's really my process now is just always recognizing when I have an idea and what that idea is, getting it down on some form, and just working from there of whatever I can do.
No, and that's awesome. Because I mean, I kind of like do say everyone has a different way of how they do their creative process. Like it just people, it's just cool to always ask that question to see what different artists do, like from country music to like pop to rap, like whatever they do to write and stuff like that. It's just the creative process is really cool. And a lot of people know that my stuff comes from a lot of my emotions and stuff like that. Like the first ever song I wrote in 2018 was about losing my grandfather. I wrote that like 2 months after he had passed away. And then I always shout my brother out, Nathan Vasquez, who recorded that song for me. And it's just that is just where a lot of my writing comes from, is just those emotions. And it's easier for me to write a full song. I wrote that in maybe like an hour and a half. And like I like finished like the whole song, like, and I knew it was the finished product the minute I wrote it. I mean, a couple of tweaks here and there within that hour and a half, but like by the end of that time, it was like it was done. And it's just, I knew that was it. And it's just, emotions are a big, big thing. And that's like where the storytelling really comes from, is because you can really tell those stories through your emotions and stuff like that.
Right, and that's kind of the beautiful thing about it too is nobody can really tell you what's right or wrong.
Exactly.
There's no such thing as and I know some people want to try to teach, this is the way that you write a song. This is how you're supposed to do it. I've always disagreed with that just because you can't. Can you imagine if you put somebody like Roger Miller in a songwriting class or John Prine and told them this is the way you write a song, not like you're doing? You can't do that. Some
Exactly.
people just you gotta let it be what it is, and
Exactly.
especially a song like that, like you're talking about, writing from a place of emotion like that and a place of loss.
Mhm.
There's a certain amount of just stone cold facts. in
Yeah.
there that cannot be changed. And so that's whatever you put on the paper, that's what that song is.
Yeah.
And somebody could look at it and say, well, what if you said this or said that? No, that's not what happened. No, that's not how I felt. That's not,
Ex-
this is about right here. It's not
exactly.
about, it's not about thinking about what could be a more colorful way of, no, this is what came from right here. That's all it is. And
Exactly. And I
it's
mean,
it's beautiful.
especially, yeah, no, and especially like in like the chorus of my song Back to When and stuff like that, a lot of people can hear, like a lot of my friends and family, like closer family and stuff like that, they know that like a lot of those words in that chorus and stuff just come right from like emotions. Like there's no other way I could have written that. It's just like they'll quote a line from it is laying in the yard counting planes. Like we used to sit out on the deck and count planes at nighttime, like after dinner. Like there's no other way I'm writing that like that because that's what happened. That's the memories I remember. And like sitting in the house cheering on the home team and stuff like that. Like we were a big sports family. And like it just there's no other way to just word those kind of things because those are the emotions and memories that I remember the most.
Stone Cold, man. That's probably my favorite type of songwriting. I don't know if you've ever listened to Guy Clark or not.
Yes.
Well, a song like Desperados, Waiting for a Train, or
Mhm.
Dublin Blues,
Yes.
uh, anything like that. Let 'em roll.
Mhm. Yeah.
That'll really, and a lot of his influence came from poetry too. So
Yeah.
it wasn't just a musical thing, but that'll really, you sit down and listen to a song like that, or like a song you wrote. I can already tell just from the couple of lines you quoted and just what it's about.
Mhm.
I know that's the kind of thing that just you can't change. It's
Exactly.
something that comes from the heart. As corny as that sounds to some people, it's and you can feel it. It's weird whenever you start writing that you can kind of feel that whatever it is
Ex-
that little bit of almost there's a little bit of a relief, but there's also just there's some pressure building up because you're about to turn over some leaves you didn't really ever want to turn over.
No, exactly. And I mean, there's just nowadays, there's just so many talented songwriters out there. There's so many talented artists out there. And I mean, especially last year with COVID and stuff like that, people were still battling all that stuff. But a lot of people are really trying to push more of their music out there and stuff now. And like a lot of people like that had it on the back burner were like kind of just really starting to get out there and push their music. And there's a lot of new artists up and coming in country music, in pop music, in rap, and just stuff like that. But the hardest question is what I always ask, and that's what I'm getting to right now is at the end of the day, what makes you you? Like what makes Ryan Harmon Ryan Harmon?
That's something that took years to figure out, and even feeling like I know what the answer is now, who knows? A year from now, it could change. There could be something else that I could look back and say, you know what, I had that wrong. That's not who I am. That's not what I do. But to answer that of who is Ryan Harmon, what does he do? It's almost reminds me of that Arnold Schwarzenegger. Who is your daddy and what does he do? Uh, Sorry, I bring everything back to a joke, and that's a
No,
terrible way to go
no, you were good.
about it. I think figuring out who I was and what set me apart took a lot of trial and error and took a lot of trying to copy everybody else.
Mhm.
And it's something that I think doesn't sound like a selling point until you see it. And you can see in somebody that they know what they're about and who they are.
Mhm.
To me, it's being able to identify your strengths and your weaknesses.
Yeah.
And there's a point in your life where you can't do that because you think that you don't have any weaknesses. Well, I can do anything. But maybe I can't do it today. Maybe I'm not great at it today, but maybe tomorrow. Well, there's some things you're just not going to be able to do to the level that somebody else can because that's not what you were meant to do. I had when I first started really getting serious about playing guitar, I thought, well, man, I'm going to be the next Eddie Van Halen. That's not what I was meant to do. And after years of trying to copy everybody else and trying to force that, like I was going to be the next and that's one thing too. I don't ever want to tell somebody that they can't do what they set their mind to, or that they can't be anything they want to be.
Mhm.
But and it's the Mick Jagger, Keith Richards quote: "Can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you want." So what you want today may not be what you really want in the long run. And there's some detail in that comes out. So yeah, what I knew was I wanted to play music for. At
Mhm.
the time, I said, "Well, I want to be the next Eddie Van Halen." Well, no, that's not what I was meant to do. But I did what I needed. So
Exactly.
I figured it out, and it took those really, and I'm glad I got hopefully all of it out of my system in high school of thinking that I was some hot shot that could do anything, could do everything. Once the real world hits you between the eyes and you get around some people who really do know a lot more than you, and you realize, okay, I got nothing to offer. And one of the best ways to do that is sitting around playing with other musicians who
Mhm.
are far more advanced than you, and just doing a jam session. And by the time it gets around to you, and you're sitting there going, every lick that I knew has already been played, but it was played better, and I don't know what to play right now.
Yeah.
And that's when you realize that you don't know it all, and you've got some soul searching to do.
Exactly.
I think that what sets me apart from everybody else is the fact that, not to invoke Mr. Rogers, I'm me,
Right.
and it's I'm me everywhere I go,
Mhm.
whether that's on here with this interview or on TV or on stage or off stage, whatever. I know who I am, and I let that seep into everything. And
Exactly.
I'm very personality driven,
Mhm.
and that's something that I learned from people like John Prine and Roger Miller and Guy Clark.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with putting things in your own terms. There's nothing
Exactly.
wrong with making something what somebody would almost call too personal. Well, you can't relate to it because it's too personal. Well, no, it's not really. They just it's like Mad Lib. When I put my grandpa's name in the song, you fill that in with your grandpa. There's somebody else that has that story. You know, uh,
Exactly.
but I think that that's really what sets me apart is just knowing what my strengths and my weaknesses are, and just being able to look in the mirror or look somebody in the eye and just honestly say, I'm not the best singer, not the best guitar player, not the best songwriter, not the best entertainer, but I'm going to give you a better Ryan Harmon show than anybody playing. And
Exactly.
what you're going to get every night is me. And
Exactly.
it's not going to be anything more or anything less. And I think that personality and that relatability is something that people appreciate. I think that
Mhm.
it pours into everything you do. I think it comes through in the emotion of my singing. I think it comes through in whatever licks I'm playing on the guitar that night. There's a lot of blues influence in
Yeah.
there. I think it certainly comes out in the songwriting probably more than anything. And then on stage, you know, whatever I'm going through, I'm not afraid to use that audience as a therapy couch. I'm not afraid to just talk it out with you.
Right.
And the amount of friendships and connections that I've been able to develop because of that, just been it's something you can't really put any kind of the value on. And it's something
Exactly.
that's very important to me is making those connections. So I think that's not that I'm the only one who does that, but I think that that alone, just leaning on who you are and allowing your personality to shine through, it's always going to set you apart. Because
Eh,
again, I don't want to say anything that's corny, but Mr. Rogers hit the nail on the head. There's only one you, but
Right.
you've got to figure out who that is, and you got to let you be who you are.
Exactly. No, and I totally get that. And like that's definitely one of my more best answers that I've had doing this whole interview series and interviewing all these different artists and stuff. It's just who you are. You're Ryan Harmon, and no one else at the end of the day can be Ryan Harmon. Like that's you, and you know who you are. And it's really, really cool and special. Um
Yeah. It's
getting no, of
it's
course.
it's a long road to get to this point, but I'm glad that I'm here. And wherever it goes from here, I can play. That's something that a lot of people have asked me of, what's and this may be where we're going here, but
It-
what do you think? What's next? All the COVID and all of this. You
yeah.
know, you still playing music? if it all stopped today, and it could, it happens to somebody every day, and I never know when it's going to be my turn. But if it all stopped today, I could never complain. I got to do what I love for a living.
Mhm.
And does it even one got more than I ever deserved? So I can't complain about anything. Uh, but I've sure got a lot more I want.
No, exactly. And I can't wait to hear some more stuff from you just because you are talented. And I've been a fan of yours for a while, like I said, from your time on American Idol and stuff like that. And it's just you're just you're a talented singer, you're a talented songwriter, and I can't wait to hear more down the road when that time comes. I mean,
Thank you
just
very much. I appreciate that, man. And please send me some of your stuff too, man. I
oh,
really want to hear it.
no, absolutely, of course. And speaking of like singing and hearing some music and stuff like that, that's bringing us to a little performance by you to kind of wrap things up here today.
Absolutely. I hope this thing's in tune. It's
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, for the technical difficulty. We were going to have Ryan Harmon perform live here for us, but we were having some issues technically. So I'm just going to play a little bit of one of his songs. It's called Country Fried, and we're going to take a listen before we end this thing off tonight.
I was baptized in Nola Creek where I grew up, came for fishing. Like the blood inside of me from old family tradition. Built on grandpa's preaching, grandma's gravy and cat hair biscuits. It ain't just a dirt road romance, it's my childhood memories. I ain't saying that it made me, it helped raise me. It's where the good Lord saved me. And He gave me 3 calls and truth to testify, and it's home to me. It's all I've ever known to be. All it's in my soul, stone cold certified, American born and country fried.
So that is Country Fried by Ryan Harmon. Um, just can't say enough about that guy. He is super, super, super talented. What an amazing singer songwriter he is. If y'all want to go check him out on Ryan Harmon Music, on Facebook, Instagram, he's out everywhere on Spotify, Apple Music, all that fun stuff. That song was Country Fried. I also recommend listening to I Knew This Would Happen and Midnight Fire. Those are 3 of my top songs from him. And I will see y'all next week. Thanks for tuning in.